Leaving a 5-star review doesn't summon any spirits, probably. But it does help Vivid Nightmares reach more true crime lovers who like their cases with a side of creepy. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Click the stars and help me keep the nightmares coming.
Stories forgotten begin to speak. Whispers of truth, twisted with fear. You've entered the dark, you're already here. Vivid Nightmares.
The body of a 17-year-old boy is found beneath an old oak tree in the Mississippi woods. No witnesses, no signs of a struggle. The sheriff says suicide, but his parents find a map and the first page of a secret their son never got to finish. This is Vivid Nightmares, and tonight, we're unearthing 4 Southern crimes the world tried to forget. Welcome to Vivid Nightmares, the podcast where Southern stories meet shadowy truths. I'm your host, Bridgett Denise, and in this episode, we're heading down dirt roads and back roads where blood was spilled and justice never quite followed. First, we'll meet a Mississippi teen who may have stumbled into something too big to survive. Then we travel to South Carolina, where an entire family was bludgeoned to death, and the only suspect vanished into thin air. After that, we'll enter the Louisiana parishes stalked by a killer who wore a smile in public and gloves in the dark. And finally, we'll descend into the Alabama bunker that became a child's nightmare and the nation's obsession. These stories aren't folklore, they're real, and they're still echoing across the South. Story 1, The Death of Norman Ladner. Pearlington, Mississippi, 1989. He left home with his rifle and never came back. When they found Norman's body, it was beneath a tree in the woods. A single bullet wound to the head. Authorities called it suicide, but the rifle was missing, and a shortwave radio crackled in the barn. Norman had been investigating something, and someone didn't want him to finish what he started. Norman Ladner was 17, the kind of kid you'd expect to find out on a 4-wheeler with a hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. He lived with his parents on a farm in Pearlington, Mississippi, a quiet town on the edge of Hancock County. On August 21, 1989, Norman told his mother he was going out to the back acreage to check on some farm duties and hunt squirrels. He never returned. Hours later, his father went looking. He found Norman lying beneath a tree, dead from a single gunshot wound to the head. The Hancock County Sheriff's Office quickly ruled the death a suicide. But here's where it gets weird. The rifle wasn't at the scene. Norman had no history of mental illness or suicidal thoughts. There were no powder burns on his face or hands, suggesting he may not have fired the gun. The coroner never tested Norman's hands for gunshot residue. When the Ladner family got the death certificate, it raised more questions than answers. So they did what any desperate family might do. They started investigating themselves. In Norman's barn, the Ladners discovered a shortwave radio, cryptic notes, and a hand-drawn map with coordinates and strange markings. Norman, it turned out, had been snooping around government land and possibly a DEA-connected property. His parents claim he had uncovered evidence of drug trafficking or illegal dumping, maybe even CIA activity tied to the 1980s war on drugs. They reached out to congressional offices, the FBI, even 60 Minutes. But nothing came of it. One journalist claimed they were warned to back off. To this day, Norman Ladner's death remains officially a suicide. But no one, not even the local papers, seemed convinced. Theories include Norman was accidentally shot by hunters, and the scene was covered up. He uncovered something illegal and was silenced. Or maybe he was murdered by someone closer than anyone suspected. But with no new leads and no rifle ever found, the truth remains buried. Just like Norman, a map, a warning, a missing gun. Norman's family never stopped looking for answers, even when the town stopped listening. But our next case? The killer left no mystery about his weapon. Just 5 bodies, a trail of blood, and one of the longest-running manhunts in FBI history.
If this episode gave you chills or made you side-eye your hallway, share it with someone else who loves a good scare. Word of mouth is how we grow this haunted little community, and trust me, the more of us here, the darker it gets. Send it to your favorite true crime buddy or that one friend who swears they don't believe in ghosts yet.
A man walks into a hardware store and buys a shovel, a gas can, and a sledgehammer. Hours later, his family is dead. Burned bodies are found in a wooded area outside Columbia, South Carolina. The man was a government official, a father, a Yale graduate, and he disappeared like smoke. To this day, he's still missing and still on the FBI's most wanted list. Bradford Bishop was what most people would call successful. A Foreign Service officer with the U.S. State Department, fluent in 5 languages, degrees from Yale and UCLA, a promising government career and a home in a quiet Bethesda, Maryland suburb. He lived with his wife, Annette, their 3 young sons, aged 5, 10, and 14, and his mother, Lobelia Bishop. On paper, it looked like the American dream. But behind closed doors, Bradford was unraveling. He was reportedly passed over for a promotion at work, and it affected him deeply. Friends and colleagues noted he had become distant and irritable. Some described a growing depression, others a dangerous detachment. On March 1, 1976, Bishop told his secretary he was feeling ill and left work early. Security footage and receipts later showed that over the next few hours he withdrew cash from the bank, bought a gas can and shovel at a hardware store, picked up a sledgehammer from a nearby sporting goods store. Then he returned home. Authorities believe that sometime that afternoon or evening, he used the sledgehammer to bludgeon his entire family to death. First his mother, then his wife, then the children, all killed as they slept or relaxed at home. After murdering his family, Bishop loaded their bodies into the family station wagon and drove over 275 miles south into North Carolina, then South Carolina. On March 2, 1976, a forestry worker near Columbia, SC discovered the burned corpses of 5 individuals in a shallow hole. The scene was grim. Gasoline had been poured over the bodies and set ablaze. Fingerprints and dental records later confirmed the victims as the Bishop family. But Bradford, gone. The car was eventually found abandoned in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Keys still inside. His passport was missing. So were hiking boots, a map, and a small stash of cash. Over the decades, dozens of alleged sightings of Bishop have been reported in Italy, where he once worked, in Stockholm, in Switzerland, and Belgium. Some theories suggest he assumed a new identity and lived in Europe, blending in thanks to his fluency in languages. Others believe he may have taken his own life in the mountains, his body simply never found. But the FBI doesn't think so. In 2014, they added Bishop to the 10 most wanted fugitives list. He was profiled on America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries. And then, silence. As of today, Bradford Bishop would be in his 80s. The case remains open. The murders remain unsolved. And the family he left behind never received justice. A man with no criminal history. A family destroyed. A trail that disappears into the pines. But our next case doesn't end in a mountain range. It begins in the heart of Louisiana, where a killer knocked politely, then left entire households dead.
This show runs on coffee, research rabbit holes, and southern ghost stories whispered in the dark. If you'd like to support Vivid Nightmares, consider leaving a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show reach more listeners. And if you want even more haunted history and unsolved stories, Visit our link in the show notes to grab bonus content and more. Thanks for helping keep the nightmares vivid.
They called him a handyman, quiet, polite. But behind closed doors, Daniel Blank had a different set of tools. In the span of months, 6 people were bludgeoned, stabbed, or strangled, most of them elderly. All lived in small southern towns where everyone left their doors unlocked, until Daniel came knocking. Daniel Joseph Blank wasn't the kind of man most people suspected of anything worse than skipping church. He worked odd jobs, fixed cars, smiled often, lived in St. John the Baptist Parish in Louisiana, a tight-knit community near the Mississippi River, where folks knew each other by name and crime was low. But behind that smile was a gambler, a man drowning in debt, and someone who, when desperate, made the unthinkable seem reasonable. Between 1996 and 1997, a wave of terror swept through St. John, Ascension, and Assumption parishes. The first victim, Joan Brock, found bludgeoned in her home in La Place. Then came Lynn Wagner, 38, beaten to death in her living room. But it didn't stop. Blank targeted people he knew, elderly friends, neighbors, even customers who had hired him for work. One woman was stabbed 15 times. Another was strangled with a telephone cord. One man, ex-police chief Sam Arcuri, was shot with his own gun. Daniel always took cash, jewelry, or electronics. But these weren't just robberies gone wrong. These were brutal, targeted executions. What brought him down? Sloppiness. After one murder, he used the victim's bank card, and surveillance footage caught him withdrawing cash. The police recognized him immediately. When they finally brought Blank in, he confessed to 6 murders, casually, as if reciting chores. He said he killed them all because he needed money to cover gambling debts and car payments. Nothing personal, just survival. Blank was convicted and sentenced to death. As of now, he's on death row at Angola Prison, Louisiana. But investigators believe there may be more victims. Blank worked in multiple parishes. He traveled often, and he only confessed to murders they already linked him to. He may be responsible for 8 to 10 additional killings, especially among the elderly who lived alone. Cases once dismissed as break-ins gone wrong. In Louisiana, people used to leave their doors open until Daniel Blank gave them a reason to lock up tight. But what if your home wasn't the problem? What if the danger was waiting, underground? The bus driver tried to stop him. He was shot in the head. Then the man grabbed the 5-year-old boy. For the next 7 days, the child was held underground in a homemade bunker wired with explosives. The door locked tight, the world above holding its breath. This is the story of a little boy's nightmare and the violent mind behind it. It was January 29, 2013, a regular Tuesday in Midland City, Alabama. Charles Poland, a 66-year-old school bus driver, was finishing his afternoon route, dropping kids off one by one. That's when 65-year-old Jimmy Lee Dykes boarded the bus, armed with a gun. He demanded 2 children, young boys between the ages of 6 and 8. Poland refused. He stood in the aisle, blocking the way. Dykes shot him 4 times in the head in front of the children. Then he grabbed 5-year-old Ethan Gilman, a kindergartner with developmental delays, and disappeared off the bus. Dykes brought Ethan to a 6 by 8 foot underground bunker on his rural property. It was fortified, booby-trapped. He had spent months, maybe years, building it in secret. Inside there was a crude ventilation pipe, a sleeping mat, palms wired to the walls, and a single hatch above ground. Dykes had previously been described by neighbors as a paranoid survivalist, a Vietnam vet with anti-government beliefs, and someone who had once beaten a dog to death with a lead pipe. He'd been stockpiling weapons and ranting about conspiracies, but no one could have imagined this. For the next 6 days, law enforcement and FBI negotiators tried to reason with Dykes through a PVC pipe he used for communication. He allowed Ethan juice boxes and coloring books. He threatened to blow everything up if they tried to rush him. He made political demands, including airing his manifesto. All the while, snipers surrounded the property. Drones flew overhead. The nation watched in horror. But Ethan? He held on. Brave, quiet, scared. Trapped underground with a killer. On February 4th, the FBI spotted Dykes holding a gun. Surveillance suggested he was becoming more erratic and dangerous. FBI hostage rescue team agents breached the bunker using explosives and flashbangs. Dykes was shot and killed. Ethan was rescued, shaken but alive. Authorities later revealed the bunker was wired with explosives. Dykes was armed with multiple weapons. There was no exit plan. It was going to end one way or another. Ethan was reunited with his family and recovered over time, thanks to therapy and overwhelming public support. But the scars of what happened in that bunker may never fully fade. For Midland City, it was a reminder. Terror doesn't always come from far away. Sometimes it lives just down the road and builds itself a place to hide. From Mississippi woods to Alabama bunkers, Southern soil has a way of swallowing secrets, but not forever. Norman Ladner's parents still believe their son was silenced. Bradford Bishop? He may be out there, living under another name. Daniel Blank sits on death row, but his trail of blood may be longer than we'll ever know. And Ethan survived the unimaginable. These are the stories the headlines moved on from, but we didn't. Got a theory? Know a case like these? Share it with us at Vivid Nightmares Pod on Instagram or TikTok. And don't forget, subscribe, leave a review, and join us next week, because sometimes the South doesn't forget. It buries.
When the lights go low.
This show runs on coffee, research rabbit holes, and Southern ghost stories whispered in the dark. If you'd like to support Vivid Nightmares, consider leaving a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show reach more listeners. And if you want even more haunted history and unsolved stories, visit our link in the show notes to grab bonus content and more. Thanks for helping keep the nightmares vivid